Good evening and welcome to Metro Focus. I'm Jenna Flanagan. Governor Cuomo framed it as the most productive legislative session in modern political history here in New York. Many Republicans certainly disagree. But whichever way you lean, this much is certain. The progressive takeover was in full effect this year in Albany, with Democrats firmly in control of both the state Senate and the Assembly for the first time in years. Lawmakers pushed through several big-ticket items focused on climate change, rent regulations, and sexual harassment as the session came to a close. For more on what got done and what's still to come, let's bring in WNYC's Fred Mogul, who covers New York State politics and government. And we're also joined by Ben Max, Gotham Gazette executive editor. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Hi there, Jenna.
Thank you.
So, what were, from your perspective, some of the big ticket items, pieces of legislation that made it through the finish line this year in Albany?
There is such a long list, but some of the biggest, most dramatic things that affect the most people, I think certainly rent regulation reform is at the very top of the list, changing the ability of landlords to take units out of the rent regulation system, changing their ability to raise rents based on capital improvements. That's going to affect a lot of people. There's driver's licenses for immigrants was a very contentious item. Will ultimately affect approximately 265,000 undocumented immigrants who will now be eligible for licenses. Not that big necessarily a population overall, but very significant to those people, and politically a very heated event, very heated debate and controversial decision.
And that one's expected to see a legal challenge. At least that's what the governor predicted, and he's seeing some pushback on it from some county clerks. So that's one to watch certainly going forward, but certainly a monumental passage of that legislation. I would say, it's so interesting. There was so much done from January to June that we almost forget the long list that Fred mentioned. I mean, back in January, they did voting and election reform. They did several gun control measures. They did reproductive health rights. They did LGBT rights. And then they followed it up with a bunch of other things in June and even through the April budget. So it was really, it was a historic and sweeping year. How it all is implemented, executed, affects New Yorkers is, of course, to be seen. But I would definitely highlight those measures. And you mentioned climate legislation. That's very interesting because what they passed is not only about trying to cut down on carbon emissions, but it's really about pushing the New York economy towards a economy based on green energy, renewable energies, and that's going to have potentially significant impact on the way that a lot of workers and businesses operate.
What do we think about where the Republicans fared in all of this? I mean, we saw them give pushback to like the Green Light Bill, giving undocumented immigrants access to driver's licenses and several other pieces of legislation, and yet they weren't successful in blocking very much. So do we know what's next for John Flanagan and the Senate Republicans?
Political minorities in legislative chambers do not have much power if the majority is thick. Now the last time Democrats were in control, roughly a decade ago, they had a 1 or 2 vote margin. They had all kinds of shenanigans. All hell broke loose. Anyone who was there remembers it very vividly. That's what happens when you have a razor thin majority. The Republicans, when they were in control, had a razor thin majority that way. If you could that in that environment, you pick off a vote here, you pick off a vote there. You can make some changes. The minority might have some power, but you almost have supermajorities in both chambers now. Democrats really rule the roost.
And the legislature is up for election every 2 years, so there's elections next year, and there's certainly the Republicans trying to win back some state Senate seats. I don't know if they even think that they can retake the chamber, but I think they want to chip away at the margin. They're going to use some of the things that were passed, including the Green Light Bill and the DREAM Act and even rent regulations to an extent, and other things, the gun control measures, to try to flip some of those Senate seats back. We saw a very interesting dynamic towards the end of the session where Long Island Democrats, who are more or less the most vulnerable to Senate Republicans trying to take those seats back, voting against some of the things that went through. They're trying to find some political cover for those elections next year. So if the Republicans have any hope of doing anything, it's not really blocking legislation so much, it's through the next election cycles.
Well, one big piece of legislation that a lot of, I think, progressives had hoped for was legalizing recreational use of marijuana. And we saw that just seem to crash and burn in Albany this session. But it wasn't necessarily the Republicans whose hand sort of put an end to it. correct?
Yeah, no,
Right. No, I mean, and that goes to sort of the limits of the majority. I mean, even though they have votes to spare, they didn't have enough votes to spare. Those Long Island 6 that people have been talking about, that Ben was just referring to, plus a couple in Westchester and the Hudson Valley, you could lose a few of them and pass it. You can't afford to lose all of them. And as one of them told me, very much off the record, if they hadn't made us do driver's licenses, then you'd have pot now. Like they could maybe do 1 or 2 or 3 unpopular votes. I think that they had concerns about where their constituents were on marijuana. They had concerns about the PTAs and the sheriffs and the law enforcement, the medical community. A lot of ambivalence, a lot of it, I think, a very personal held belief. And just, by the way, not exclusively in the suburbs. There were people in Queens and Brooklyn also who had reservations.
Something I think important to point out is that this was not something that Governor Cuomo really took on as a signature issue that he wanted to get over the finish line. He certainly backed it every time he was asked. So it wasn't something he just sort of shelved but said he supported, but he was in between. He didn't hold the press conferences and the rallies and the events around the state that he does when he wants to get something big passed. So his advocacy on the issue, I think, is worth raising questions, especially when he saw that some of his base on Long Island was starting to push back against it.
Is there a chance that we can see lawmakers coming back to readdress any of these issues, particularly if there's going to be legal challenges?
I think it's always a theoretical possibility. I think it takes an awful lot to get the legislature back into session. They tend to do it for a very urgent, self-contained sort of thing rather than a large, open-ended one. So I think over time we might see a little longer session. They're getting a huge pay raise to be, quote unquote, full-time lawmakers, and so they could maybe have in New York City. Essentially has an ongoing session year-round, and the legislators will now receive salary almost commensurate with New York City lawmakers. So maybe they will do it more going forward, but in the immediate 6 months until the next session, I wouldn't rule it out, but I don't see it coming.
I think you raise a good point about, maybe there's some legal challenges. We did see them have to clean up a couple bills and even pull back an automatic voter registration bill at the end of session, which they promised to revisit at the beginning of next year. But there could be other things that pop up because they did so much, and a lot of it quickly, last minute, as happens in Albany, we know quite a bit. The other thing to watch towards the end of this year is in the budget, they sort of kicked the can down the road with a commission on campaign finance reform. And that commission is going to be putting forward its recommendations, which could lead legislators to head back to Albany and deal with not accepting those recommendations or accepting them, tweaking them. We could see some interesting things develop around campaign finance reform, which was one of the sort of unresolved and high-profile issues of the session.
And yes, of course, goes back to Albany's lingering issues with ethics. Listen, gentlemen, I want to thank you both for joining us on the program. There's so much more that we could be talking about in regards to what happened in Albany, but we'll be looking forward to more of your reporting going forward.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.